All right, welcome to the next video in our series. This is the fourth VisiCalc video. We'd previously built a user input loop. We learned how to print our grid, and we figured out how to assign individual numbers into the cells. Our objective now is to branch just beyond cell. We're going to use text cells and date cells as well. Because the inputs for texts and dates can go longer than the 7 characters, which is the width of each of our columns, we're going to talk about how to approach truncating our outputs so that we don't mess up the appearance of our grid. And then to make sure that we aren't actually destroying our inputs, that we can still recall the full values given as an input, we're going to talk about recalling individual values. All right, so up until this point, perhaps it was possible we might have said something like B2 equals 30. B2 equals 33. That's the kind of command we would have worked before. Our code broke this up into B2 and equals and 33. We figured out where we were assigning the value of 33. We created a new cell object. We gave it the value 33, and then we dropped that cell in the correct location so that when our print grid method traversed through the spreadsheet, checking, it's not displaying anywhere, it's null, whenever it found something that was a cell and had a value, it would recall up this value 33 and print it in the grid. So for example, our code at this point should be able to say B2 equals 33. When I print it out, bang, 33 appears right there. Awesome. Well, the new thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to say, how about C7 equals hello there? Okay. And I go to print that out, and I see it is trying to put hello there in my grid. Because the first 7 characters is all that can fit, I see hello there is what went in. So the example of the input is C7 equals hello there. But if I want to make sure, gosh, did I just destroy my input? Is the HERE from hello there just gone? I can ask for the individual cell C7, and when I hit enter, I can see the whole thing is still there. It's just being clipped so that my grid can display nicely. And we're going to talk about how to do that. The other thing is perhaps for date cell, maybe I said F4 equals, how about, November 20th, 2014. That's just a date that came to the top of my head. November 20th, 2014. If I make that an input and I go to print it out, I can see November 20th, but there's, I can't see the rest of it because that's all the characters I get. But I say, hey, F4, do you got the whole thing? And F4 is good to go. So these are the commands we want to do. Let's talk about how to break this down. Okay, so first up, TextCell. Well, how am I supposed to get my code to know the difference between a number cell and a text cell? Hopefully, when you see the inputs, you should get a sense that what separates this out right here is this quote. So your signal to your code is going to be if the third token is a quote, I am assigning a text cell. And so what that means is whether you're using substring, whether you're using a scanner, whether you're using that string method split, figure out what the third token is. If it's a quote, you're going to make a new text cell. The next thing you need to know is if you're going to make a new text cell, you probably need to do something like TextCell TC equals new text cell, and then you got to feed it whatever the input is right here. So you got to figure out how to clip out just the text. We don't want the quotes. You want just the text. And then the thing that should be noticeable is that the TextCell class will try not to compile. I guess that's, hang on one second. Because of a constructor conflict. Well, what does that mean? So remember, TextCell extends cell. The reason we did that is so that I could make a 2-dimensional array of cells, and I could put cells and anything that inherits from cells in that spreadsheet. So my grid is going to be full of, look at this, it's got texts, it's got just a general cell, it's got a date cell. That was the benefit, that's why we did it. But when I defined the constructor for the cell class, what I said was, hey, when you construct a cell, you've got to give it an int, and we will store that int in the field. And now, all children of cell are under the assumption that we must first hand in a number to construct our cell. So I'm going to give you a little bit of help here. I think the TextCell constructor should look something like this. Public class, public TextCell, and obviously we're going to provide some text would be our input. And then recall the rules. We have a video on this. If you want to go back and look at inheritance and constructors, this might help. But the 3 rules are: if we don't provide a constructor, Java will. If we are a child class and we don't call super, Java will. And whenever we have a subclass constructor, we must start by calling super, and we must refer to a constructor in the parent. Well, the way I built my class, and maybe yours is different, but the way I built my class was I said, look, all cells have to take an int as a parameter. That value is going to be what the cell is worth. So later in formulas, this cell is going to be worth 33. Well, I don't need texts to be worth a number for formulas. I don't need dates to be worth a number for formulas. It's fine for me if the number associated with these cells is just 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call super of 0. And the reason I'm doing this is because, Catherine, it's going to be another minute. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to refer to the constructor in the cell class. So remember, I always have to start with super, and I got to do it in a way that matches. Well, I don't have a special number for text cells. They can all just be 0. I'm really just going to care about the text field associated with those text cells. So that means that the rest of my constructor might just look something like this. If the name of your field is text, let's say, or I think I called mine cell text, then this is a complete constructor. This will allow your code to compile. So if you are working on a text cell input and you went to create a new text cell and you were getting some error having to do something with constructors, it's probably because as a subclass of cell, we needed to make sure we were honoring the parent's constructor by calling super. If you have any questions about that, please email me. I know it's a hair on the confusing side. All right, so this was our text cell constructor. And, okay, so we've got an input like C7 equals hello there. We know it's going to be a text cell because the third token was a quote. We do some substringing to get the text, and then we feed that text to the constructor of TextCell, and then we're able to drop that cell in the grid, right? We should have, from our previous checkpoint, methods called get row index and get column index. And what that means is I should be able to say, spreadsheet of whatever the location is row, and the location column, and then drop in my new text cell TC, something like that. And row and column will have been found by get row index and get row column. Okay, so this helps us take care of text cell. Text cell is done. Yes, I'm going to put that right here, just so that explains that. Okay, let's talk about DateCell. Slightly more complex, but not terribly. So we're building, we hopefully somewhere in our program, we have a method whose job it is to process the command given from the user, right? So we're saying something to the effect of, hey, if the user didn't say help and they didn't say quit, take this string that there was their command, let's send that down to another method, and this method's job is going to be to figure out what is it the user wants to do. And it could be assigning a number to a cell. It could be assigning text to a cell. It could be assigning a date to a cell. So how do we know which is which? Well, I'll start by checking, is the third token a quote? Okay, if it's not, let's check. Does the third token contain a forward slash? That's my recommendation for determining a date cell. Does the third token contain a forward slash? Whoops, slash. Okay. If it doesn't have a quote and it doesn't contain a slash, then we're looking at a generic number. So that's a little hint about how I would build the if logic, right? Okay. From here, we know our DateCell class should have 3 fields, right? It needs to have a month and a day and a year. I think those should obviously be of type int. And the idea is, how do we take, all right, so we've determined it's a date cell. How do I start splitting this up? Well, I think you could use substring to go ahead and break that up so you get your month, day, and year. You should probably define a date cell constructor that probably takes int month, int day, int year, and then, oops, maybe I should face that the correct direction. And then, your implementation goes here. Remember to address super. I think you're probably going to call super 0 again as a start because date cells don't need to represent as a number. They can just be 0. That's fine. So you will use substring to separate the tokens. You will find the int, the day, and the month. You will create a new date cell object, and you will drop that in the grid. It's going to look something similar to TextCell. Okay. Truncating. So the way to handle this is, a lot of people think that you should manage it right when the input is given. Go ahead and clip the input so that it's going to fit later on. The problem with that approach is you might end up clipping your input and then you lose all the characters after character 7 forever. So the way I would do it is I would say wait until the moment you are about to print the cell's contents. And I would check, what you're going to print, I think is often communicated through the toString method. Hopefully at this point you have a toString method in cell and you overrode that toString method in TextCell and DateCell, right? Because a DateCell presents itself very differently than a cell would, and a TextCell presents itself differently than a cell, right? Cell's just going to return the number. A DateCell has to take its 3 fields and combine them together to present itself nicely. What I would do is I would call the toString method and store that string to a variable. Then I would check, hey, is that variable longer than 7? If so, substring it down to the right size, then display that truncated value. So what this does is this says, hey, cell, how would you represent yourself? Ooh, shoot, I see you have too many characters. I'm going to take the string that I just got from you, I'll clip it down, and now it's going to fit. So that the original cell does not, let's see what's the right way to describe this. The original cell does not lose its value, which is what we don't want it to do. Okay, so then how do we recall individual values? Great question. Basically, I got to figure out how all of my inputs are different, right? So the logic of my code, I think, checked thusly. It said, hey, look, are you quit? Okay, if you're not quit, are you help? All right, you're not help. So we're doing some kind of value assignment. We're going to mess with the cells in some way. So then I checked, was there a quote? If there wasn't a quote, I checked, did we contain a slash? If we didn't contain a slash, then the question becomes, then we just assume it's a number. That's how the code works up until this point. Well, I'm going to recommend you add an intermediate step right here, which is you're going to check, is it only a single token? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, most of these other commands are multiple tokens, right? So if I said, hey, B3 equals 7, that's 3 tokens. If I said B2 equals banana, that's multiple tokens. If I said G8 equals, 10, 11, 20, 10, 22, 35, that's multiple tokens. But if I just say C6. That's a single token. So how do we know if it's a single token? I think there's a few good ideas. If you used split, then you're going to check to see the length of your array. But I'm willing to bet most of us did not use split, in which case I'm going to recommend you use a scanner, and you use a scanner look ahead like has next. If has next fails, so if you consume this first token and then you ask the question, hey, do you has next? If that fails, you know that you're trying to just recall an individual value. If it doesn't fail, if it's like, yeah, I've got more, then you know that you're dealing with a TextCell assignment, a DateCell assignment, or just a regular cell assignment. And then how do you get the original value that's stored? Again, I would just call toString, or not even, right? toString gets automatically called when we print that object. You should just be able to print that cell, which automatically calls toString, and it should reveal the full length of what's there. So when my code said, hey, F4, oh, looks like you're just the token F4, there's nothing else there, go to the right row and column and call toString on what's there. And this is the result of my code of calling toString. It gives me the month, the day, and the year correctly. Oh my gosh, I can't spell automatically. Oh boy. Okay. So that is TextCells, DateCells, truncating, and recalling individual values. I want to emphasize working with all these different types is challenging. And you might be tempted to say, forget this, man. I'm not going to make a two-dimensional array of cells. I'm just going to make a two-dimensional array of strings. None of this needs to be, specifically numbers or months or anything like that. And even if it is, even if I'm going to need those numbers later, I could just do a little bit of work to convert those things with integer.parseInt. And I just want to caution you, the purpose of this particular project is to stretch your skills working with multiple classes. We could build VisiCalc with just VisiCalc and Grid could operate a two-dimensional array of strings. And VisiCalc and Grid would be huge and bloated. They would be hard to read, but you could technically get the functionality you want. I'm going to challenge you. Don't do that. You can get a lot of power by splitting cell and TextCell and DateCell and formula cell into their own individual cells, because then they get their own constructors, they get their own fields, they get their own toString method, and it'll end up saving you work. And this is the kind of coding we need to be able to do in the future. So if this is the point where you're getting frustrated, email me, get help from me, get help from a peer. I know this is kind of brave new territory, but there is support for you to make sure you can be successful. All right, thanks for watching.